Empire actor Jussie Smollett is now in police custody.
He's charged with making false statements to police, which could result in prison time.
He cost the city and Cook County a fortune and resources.
This particular hate hoax has to be atoned for.
Special Counsel Bob Mueller's probe expected to wrap up as early as next week.
The special counsel needs to bring his evidence forward, if he has any, and let's get on with it.
That American ISIS bride says, I'm sorry I made some mistakes. I want to come home.
The bottom line is that what she did was what they call levying war against the state.
Kamala Harris joked about smoking pot, but guess who isn't laughing? Her own father. The pathetic pandering is so cringeworthy that even her own father is throwing her under the bus.
Thanks for nothing. A Times Square billboard slamming Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for praising Amazon's decision to cancel their New York City headquarters.
It's huge. I'm paying it most of the time. I'm on a plan. They just do an estimate monthly.
They do offer that.
Right.
I like that plan.
But I'll tell you one thing they do about this place. The minute you're done with the show, they shut the lights. I mean, I walked in between the 5 and outnumbered overtime, and there's not a soul here. You think we abandoned the place. And then it comes back on. So we're doing a great job watching the light bill.
Between the 5 and outnumbered overtime, we're on between those two shows.
No one.
Between the 5, which is at 5 o'clock, and outnumbered
overtime.
The 5. Oh, at night.
5 at night and outnumbered overtime. This place is empty.
So they turn off the lights.
Between the 5, which is at 5 p.m., ends at 6. Then outnumbered overtime is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
When Heather Faulkner says, "Here's Dana," to the time Harris Faulkner says, "Here's Dana."
He doesn't know the schedule, and he doesn't know his friend's
go
names.
right off.
Are you talking about the story with Martha McCallum?
Oh my gosh!
goodness.
Okay, we're gonna hash all of this out during the next commercial break when the lights are on.
Boy,
Okay, can we talk some news here?
That's right. We'll get down to that. We've got a Fox News alert. Empire actor Jussie Smollett is now in police custody. He reportedly turned himself in at 5:15 local time Chicago. There are reports he may have made a statement. He is currently being booked, having a mugshot taken, and also fingerprinted.
Not a good day for him. His arrest comes hours after Smollett was named an official suspect in the alleged hate crime attack against himself. He is charged with making false statements to police that can result in prison time.
We're going to learn more about those charges in a brand new news conference that's coming up in about 2 hours. Matt Finn is, meanwhile, live in Chicago as Smollett prepares to face a judge. Matt.
Brian, Ainsley, Steve, right after this report, we are headed to that news conference, so we will bring you the details from Chicago Police Superintendent. More about Jussie Smollett's arrest expected to be revealed. Jussie Smollett is represented by 3 different attorneys, including high-profile criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos, and it's our understanding that Smollett never responded to Chicago Police's final request for an interview that they made last Saturday. So police took their case to a grand jury where they got the felony charge approved and the ability to arrest Smollett. Smollett's attorney released a statement writing, quote, "Like any other citizen, Mr. Smollett enjoys the presumption of innocence, particularly when there has been an investigation like this one where information, both true and false, has been repeatedly leaked. Given these circumstances, we intend to conduct a thorough investigation and to mount an aggressive defense." New surveillance video also shows the 2 brothers that allegedly carried out the hoax with Smollett purchasing supplies for the attack, including black masks and a red hat, which Smollett reportedly instructed them to purchase. The brothers' attorney says they received some type of money from Smollett, but not in the narrative the public thinks. Chicago police say they do not expect to charge these brothers. The brothers' attorney praises Chicago police's meticulous investigation and says the truth will be revealed.
This story has a lot of complications to it. We're not trying to hide anything from the press, but we wanted to make sure that everything checked out.
Over the past few days, we've been trying to figure out exactly where Smollett has been. We have not been able to confirm that, but now we obviously do know he is here in the city of Chicago. He is in police custody, and in a few hours, he will be transported to appear before a judge. Brian, Ainsley, Steve.
I wonder what excuse he could possibly have for this.
Well, thank you, Matt. There was one story out this morning out of Chicago that he had made a statement to police when he was taken into custody. Then something I just saw said he had not. Nonetheless, when they do have that 10 a.m. Chicago or Eastern time, we believe, press conference. I would imagine that is when we will get word of any
We will all
statement.
be watching.
Plus, we'll probably get a look at the first mugshot, if that is.
Yeah, it has been such a fascinating story to watch. We all want to know the truth, and if this really was a hoax, and if it is, how horrific that would be. But it's something everyone's talking about. Judge Napolitano was on with us earlier, and we were asking, do you think he was truthful with his attorney? He said, I don't think so, based on this. Watch.
Cost the city and Cook County a fortune in resources and money. I am going to guess he did not tell his own lawyers the truth. If he told his own lawyers the truth, there was a time, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 days ago, they could have gone to the prosecutors and worked out a deal. Now it is too late.
It is
No
too
deal.
late. Plus, the big question is, the brothers apparently told the grand jury yesterday, according to TMZ, that they had nothing to do with the letter. So who put together that hate letter that apparently arrived at the Empire headquarters a week before this staged attack? And the story is that he was Jesse Smollett was so disappointed that it didn't get a bigger reaction. That's why they staged this supposed hate attack.
A series of some of the worst decisions you could possibly imagine, it seems. Meanwhile, about how it's handled, it's amazing how hopeful many in the media were that this whole thing would end up being an anti-Trump story that you could ultimately blame President Trump for. Listen.
There's a real distinction to be made here between the way a lot of the local media out in Chicago handled this and the way the national media handled it. The local media in Chicago did pretty well on this story, and I think the reason was that to them it was a local crime story made into a big story by the fact that we had a celebrity as the alleged victim. The national media, I think, looked at this story and decided it was a Trump story, because in the national media, particularly in Washington, there's only one story all the time, and it's Donald Trump. And to most of them, it's Donald Trump and how awful and dangerous he is. So any story that, alleges that Trump supporters have, in the crudest and most bigoted way have assaulted somebody fits right into their view of Trump and of his supporters.
Right. It's amazing that people have even segued. I've been watching some other shows. They even segue to, well, even if this isn't true, it doesn't matter. Donald Trump has still brought hate in our country. All right, really? We're taking a fake story and beating Donald Trump over the head with it.
Right.
Well, there was a rush to judgment initially, and now a lot of those people who said it was one thing had to backtrack.
People are wondering why he would even do this. He's a
Great
famous
question.
actor.
Right.
Why needing the extra attention if he did do this?
Oh, he's an activist, an anti-Trumper, obviously. It's 7 minutes after the hour. I couldn't believe this was true. I had to hit the side of my iPad 3 times.
Yeah, right, I know.
The first story.
It's over.
Yeah,
it might be over.
Yeah, the first story in Drudge said that Mueller probe to be wrapped up as soon as next week.
Right, I think Drudge attributed that to CNN at that point. And it does line up when you think about the fact that we heard last week or so, Rod Rosenstein is going to step down as his job. The president's already going to nominate somebody from the Transportation Department. Rosenstein had said he would be there through the process. And now, what's curious is Josh Hawley, the new senator from the great state of Missouri, he has heard Andrew McCabe over the last week talk about how, he had a conversation with Rod Rosenstein. Hey, how do we get rid of the president? Should we do this? Who's in on the cabinet that we should talk to? That is why Senator Hawley now has sent a letter to Chris Wray, the FBI director, saying, I need some answers about what was going on, and I want the answers as soon as you can get to them. Here's the senator.
It sounds like to me the FBI didn't want any oversight. The FBI didn't want to be held accountable. And when the president and others tried to do so, they retaliated against him. So I want to know. I want to hear from the FBI. I want to know who launched this counterintelligence investigation. I want to know why. I want to know who oversaw it. I want to know who was involved with it. And I want to know now. We need to have oversight here. That's why I've demanded answers from the FBI, and I'm willing to take whatever steps are necessary to get those answers.
Mueller has to deliver the report to the new AG, William Barr, and then the report is not required to be made public. And then Mueller is required to explain his reason for prosecuting or not prosecuting anyone named in that report.
Yeah, there is a sense that Mueller wanted he wanted his interview with the president. He got written questions. He's going to close it out with that. Never look for a subpoena. Guess he had enough answers. The word is the Mueller team was looking heavily into his attempt. Was there an attempt to obstruct this investigation between his tweets and what he's done behind closed doors? There's been 26 individuals who have been indicted for this. The Russians are never going to see any problems with it. But for Roger Stone and for Michael Flynn, they've been caught up in it. There's a sense now in Washington, as Jonathan Carr alluded to about 3 weeks ago, that this will not be the smoking gun to take down President Trump. And if it's not, what are Democrats going to do since they've spent the last 2 years lauding and protecting Robert Mueller?
They'll look at Adam Schiff's investigation now.
But
try to
ultimately,
find something.
it was all about Russian collusion. You know, there's people who've been arrested, the Russian bots, the bot farm and stuff like that.
We arrested all the bots.
There was no Russian collusion that we've seen so far, but we still have to wait for that report. It could come out next week.
Yeah, if I'm going to try to get through that.
No more bots.
I think it's going to be very interesting. Although a lot of people won't accept it.
I'm asked every day if I'm a robot or not in some form. I am not a robot.
We need a very awkward toss. We haven't had one in a while.
We haven't had
I got one. I got one. So joining us now before.
No, you can't love the
Before
toss.
outnumbered overtime, here's Julian.
I see where you were both going with that.
I do
Sitting
too.
in the back of
I
the
do
train,
too, yeah.
actually. All right, let's get you caught up on the news that we're following, starting with this. A Coast Guard lieutenant accused of plotting a mass domestic terror attack is due in court today. Prosecutors say Christopher Paul Hassan had a hit list of possible targets, including Democratic leaders and journalists. He also wanted to kill every last person on Earth. The self-proclaimed white nationalist stockpiling 15 firearms with more than 1,000 rounds of ammo in his basement in Maryland. The U.S. facing conflict with disputed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The Fed's now trying to figure out how to send food, medicine, and hygiene products to Venezuela by tomorrow, after Maduro blocked international aid. Earlier this week, acting Venezuelan President Juan Guaido pledged to allow supplies to enter the country. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he will not run for Senate in 2020.
I love Kansas. I'm going to be the Secretary of State as long as President Trump gives me the opportunity to serve as America's senior diplomat. It's ruled out. I'm here. I'm loving it.
The former Kansas congressman was reportedly being urged to run for Senate by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Longtime Senator Pat Roberts, also a Republican, is retiring at the end of his current term. Just call him Honest Abs. This shirtless statue of Abraham Lincoln, which has been around for a while, by the way, decades, is now going viral after someone tweeted it saying, quote, "Reminder that the Los Angeles Federal Courthouse has a statue of Abraham Lincoln where he's a shirtless young stud suggestively tugging at his waistband like a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model." Someone tweeting back, quote, "The separation of shirt and state." There are a lot of really funny puns online. Like, this is where the internet is at its finest.
Not Honest Abe, Honest Ab.
It looks like a clothed statue of David, but then you see his face. It's like Abraham Lincoln's face.
He was a very good wrestler,
strange.
probably a very good shape. I don't know where he wrestled
He
at.
was tall.
Right.
He was tall.
Chopped a lot of wood.
Marfan syndrome, they think, maybe?
That is
We're not really sure.
Long arms, yep.
All right, 8:13 now.
Okay, the number is shocking. 500,000 illegal immigrants could cross the border this year alone, but that is not even the scariest part. The brand new warning coming up next.
And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez protested Amazon's headquarters. Now one Times Square billboard is calling her out. How the freshman congresswoman is responding. That story next. Yeah, don't blame me.
On Sirius XM, your favorite shows on Channel 114. Plus, every story, every 15 minutes. Fox News headlines 24/7, Channel 115.
All right, here we go. As Democrats get ready to challenge President Trump's emergency declaration on the border wall, a new study reveals 500,000 illegal aliens are projected to successfully cross the Mexican border this year into our country, undetected by Border Patrol agents. Steve Camarata is the research director for the Center of Immigration Studies. He joins us now. Steve, we focus on how many apprehensions and how many cross. How do we know what we don't know?
Yeah, well, there are several ways to look at this. And that 500,000 figure doesn't necessarily just mean the border. It can also include people who overstay a visa. But it's clear that at minimum 200,000 people, but more are expected to do it this year, successfully, illegally cross the border between the ports of entry. And we know it because they show up in census data and some other data sources. So there's just no question about it. Well, I should say, it's a pretty solid estimate, and actually it's been true for a while. The number of people who get caught also can give us insight into how big that number is. So in addition to Census Bureau data, some administrative data, the number of people getting caught, we do have a pretty good idea of how many people likely successfully cross the border, and that number has at least been 200,000, and then you're looking at about 300,000 people successfully overstaying a visa. They come in on a tourist visa, don't go home, that sort of thing.
So where is it trending? A lot of people say, hey, the numbers aren't as bad as the president makes it out to be. Over the last 5 years, the numbers were higher, they're going down. What do you say to that?
Well, there is some evidence that the level of illegal immigration into the United States is not as high as it was, say, a decade ago. The last year looks to be pretty high. We don't have all the complete data for that, and the year before that looks to be high. So here's the bottom line, and your listeners can decide, is it a crisis? How big of a problem? Everybody still agrees there's 10 to 12 million people living in the United States illegally. There's about 17 million people here, if you count U.S.-born children, that is illegal immigrants and their children. 500,000 new people settle in the United States illegally each year. 250,000 cross the border successfully, 250 to 300,000 overstay a temporary visa. Those numbers are enormous. Maybe the way to think about it is the number of people settling in the United States illegally each year is roughly equivalent to the population of Atlanta. These are big numbers.
Big numbers, and now they're more families, and they're not from Mexico. They're from OTMs, other than Mexicans, which shows you there's something with our Central and South American policy that's giving off mixed messages. Steve, we'll see. We got 4 Democrats going to the border to see for themselves if it's a crisis or not. I look forward to seeing what they have to say. Steve Camarada, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, straight ahead. Many 2020 Democrats have some far-left ideas on their agenda. But which candidate is the most socialist of them all? We'll be giving out trophies. Our socialism scale is coming your way. Plus, it's the world's largest heavy equipment auction, and it's happening today. Jeff Flock has a preview of what's on the auction block. Hey, Jeff.
Right in the middle of it, and I can almost not hear you because of the sound. Look at all of this stuff. That is what they call a motor scraper. It's essentially a large and expensive shovel. Thousands of pieces of equipment. Biggest auction in history. Back in a moment.
Here we go. The world's largest heavy equipment auction is happening right now.
Wow, look at that. I didn't even know this existed. Thousands of people from all over the world come together down in Florida. Millions of dollars worth of equipment is up for grabs.
Right. People got to buy it. Jeff Flock is from our sister network, Fox Business.
That is so cool.
Hey, Jeff.
It is. You know, this is just incredible. If you were here, I mean, take a look at this. This is not the half of it. There are literally thousands of pieces of heavy equipment. Everything from these articulated dump trucks to bulldozers to this guy over here. This is what they call, what is it, Kieran? What do they call this?
This is a elevated motor scraper.
Now, the business is booming right now. The economy is booming right now. So there's tremendous demand for this thing.
Oh, absolutely. So, there are small and mid-sized businesses who would love to take that piece of equipment and go to work with it tomorrow if they can.
Kieran Holm is with Ritchie Brothers, and they do these auctions. This is the biggest, though, in history.
Absolutely, biggest in history. Over 13,500 pieces.
One of these pieces of equipment which you build roads with and that sort of thing, that would typically go for what, $500,000?
$500,000 new, you bet.
What can I get one here today for?
I mean, you might pay $100,000, $70,000. This is an unreserved auction, so you're going to pay what you want to pay.
No reserve on this.
Correct, every single piece.
And when the economy booms, this is when this thing.
That's right. I mean, these folks are clearly very, very bullish about the economy. They're willing to go and invest in equipment that they can put to work for the next few years to come, at least.
Gotcha. Before we get away, hey Chad, run with me over here, because I'll tell you, you just can't believe this goes on for acres and acres. How many bidders and how many pieces of equipment?
So we've got over 13,500 pieces of equipment. We have right now over 12,000 registered bidders, which equals the number of people we had last year. Last year was a $278 million sale. Yeah.
Booming economy, booming business of auctioning heavy equipment. And if you need a front-end loader, I can get one for you cheap.
I need a forklift. Brian, what do you need?
Well, I have
backhoe.
I have one of. No, I got plenty of backhoes. I have one of everything, but I'm just gonna just remind me to change the oil in them. Good luck, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Wow.
Steve, isn't that the coolest idea?
That is cool if you need heavy equipment. All right, meanwhile, let's talk about that guy right there. Democratic socialist Bernie Sanders is officially running for the White House, but the entire Democratic Party seems to be racing to the left with Bernie. So where do some of the candidates and their big government ideas fall on our socialism scale? Here to break it down is Chris Wilson, the former campaign pollster for Senator Ted Cruz. Today he's down in Austin. Chris, good morning to you.
Morning, Steve.
Okay, so last time, 2016, Bernie Sanders came close to Hillary Clinton, and now he seems to be the business model because so many of the Democrats are racing to the left, but nobody is really out-Bernieing Bernie at this point, are they?
No, well, you have to give Bernie Sanders credit for consistency. If there's an idea out there that will drag America into mid-20th century style European socialism, he's for it. And if there's not one out there for it, he'll invent one. I mean, whether it comes to trying to take over the entire economy through the Green New Deal, to massive tax cuts, to eliminating private health insurance and Medicare for all, it is really remarkable how far to the left he's gone. And, you know, it's really, when you look at the way in which the entire Democratic field is aligning themselves, they are walking right into what I think was the brilliant trap set by President Trump during the State of the Union, in which he made the call that America will not become a socialist country.
Okay, so let's look at some of Bernie's issues on a socialism scale. So, Chris, as we look at the screen, far left is socialism, and then you have Bernie Sanders' standard. And then to the right is actually, since these are all Democrats, is the center, and that's Amy Klobuchar. So you've got Bernie on the far left, Amy Klobuchar in the center, and then closest to Bernie, you've got Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and then closer to Klobuchar, you've got Cory Booker.
Right. Well, I would say, Klobuchar is interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch, particularly as it works itself out into the debates, because she's trying to become what you would classify in the modern Democratic Party as a moderate, but just 4 to 6 years ago, we would consider to be the far left. And she's doing that in a manner that isn't really all that in fashion today in the Democratic Party, which is incrementalism. So I almost feel kind of bad for her staff as they begin to gin up a presidential campaign. They'll build a team around her, and they're going to find very quickly that there's not a real taste for that or appetite for it in the Democratic Party. I think when you come to look at the other candidates, I mean, Elizabeth Warren is, that's a campaign that I really believe is kind of almost stillborn in the sense of she can't even rise to the polls in New Hampshire, which is in the same media market as Massachusetts. And her signature policies of regulating Wall Street are almost too moderate today, where you could say that eat the rich has become their battle cry. And it's, you look at the other candidates that are kind of fall in between, whether it's Kamala Harris trying to eliminate modern private health insurance, but at the same time, her policies tough on crime are closer to Bill Clinton really than they were to AOC. Okay. So she's going to have a tough time defining herself.
All right, let's define their tax policy once again. Far left, closest to socialism, is Bernie. Then you got Amy Klobuchar in the center. Then you got essentially the same lineup in the center. You got Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Cory Booker.
Yeah, well, what's going to happen here is you're just going to see them all race to the top. I mean, how much of a percentage it's almost going to be like a bidding war. Can we jump on top of each other? I think where it begins today in February of 2019, is going to be very different from where it is in the primaries. And again, this is where the debates are going to come down. You saw this to a little bit in the Republican primary in 2016, and you'll see the Democrats do it as well, just kind of outbid each other. Who's going to raise taxes the most?
Excellent question. I've heard in the last week or so a number of Democratic strategists talking about, well, we're not really talking about socialism because we're just talking about social programs. Because if so many people have equated Social Security with socialism. That's what the Democrats say. What do the Republicans say about that?
I think, again, it gets back to my original point, which just kind of plays right into the hands of where Donald Trump set out in the State of the Union to define this race. Mm-hmm. If the Democrats follow the lead of their new hot media stars like AOC and race to the left, and Bernie Sanders is potentially, there's a good chance of being their nominee, this becomes a campaign between capitalism versus socialism.
It's an easy choice then when people do vote in a couple of years. All right, Chris, thank you very much.
You bet, thank you.
All right, speaking of the left's priorities, Elizabeth Warren says, forget the border. These are the real national emergencies.
Let's do the list. Climate change, gun violence, student loan debt, right off the top.
Dana Lash says Republicans should make an ad out of that, and she will join us live from Texas next.
All right, we're back with the Fox News alert. Empire actor Jussie Smollett is now in police custody as of this morning. He reportedly turned himself in at 5:15 a.m. Chicago time after making a statement to police.
His arrest comes hours after he was named an official suspect in the alleged hate crime attack against himself. Smollett is charged with making false statements to police, and if he's convicted, he could face 3 years behind bars, if not more, actually, if they prove to be a federal crime.
Right, exactly. That's the question. Is the feds apparently are looking into the fact that the threatening letter was sent through the mail. Meanwhile, a police news conference is expected to reveal more details. 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll probably hear what was in the statement that he made. The actor will then head to court this afternoon at 1:30 for a bond hearing. Let's bring in Michelle Malkin, syndicated columnist and author. She joins us today from out in Colorado Springs. Michelle, a lot has been said about this case and the rush to judgment because so many people came out and were so supportive of him when he first told the story, which, as we now know, was not true.
Right, it wasn't true. And in my experience of reporting on hate crime hoaxes over the last 20 years, when you see one social justice huckster, you've seen them all. And I, very early on, called attention to some of the troubling contradictions, lapses, and complete nonsensical claims that were made 3 weeks ago. So I'm glad that all of the Johnny-come-latelys are finally now debunking this, because it was clear from day one when this story, quote-unquote, first broke in TMZ that it was a publicity stunt, and none of the claims that were filtered through TMZ initially made any sense. The idea that there were people in this liberal elite enclave in Chicago shouting at Jussie Smollett at 2 o'clock in the morning when it was below freezing as he was supposedly strolling around getting a sandwich didn't make sense. All of these questions were already swirling in the local media on January 29th, and it took this long for people to realize that the whole thing was a scam. Why is that? Because people were afraid. They've been intimidated for so long into asking these common sense questions.
Not the Chicago
of
cops.
Identity politics.
Not the Chicago cops. They got to the bottom of it. They were relentless in doing it, and I'm sure other cases were starved because of it. Now, a lot of candidates quickly ran to the defense and expressed their outrage. Hey, even the president did. But we should call Adam Schiff, actually tweeted immediately saying this: I met Jussie Smollett at a pride parade in Los Angeles and have seen the passion and moral clarity of his activism firsthand. This week he was the victim of a horrific attack. We pray for your speedy recovery, Jussie, and reject this act of hatred and bigotry. He has deleted that since.
Yes, a lot of people have. And of course, now people like Kamala Harris have been struck with sudden death syndrome. Ask her about the tweet that she wrote. Can't hear you. La, 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 can't hear you. And a lot of this, of course, falls on the media as well, which stoked the hysteria about it and is in large part responsible for this culture of just knee-jerk witch hunts. My question is, who's going to be accountable here? At least with the rush to judgment on Covington, we now have lawsuits. But where's the recourse for all of the Trump supporters, of course, who've been smeared by this? Because now you've got Jussie Smollett's lawyers saying, oh, well, we need a presumption of innocence. Where's the presumption of innocence for people who support the president? You mentioned Kamala Harris. Do you remember this when she was interviewed on that radio show called The Breakfast Club? Watch this.
They say you oppose legalizing weed.
That's not true.
I know.
and look, I joke about it, half joking. Half my family's from Jamaica. Are you kidding me?
You ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like
and I inhaled. I did inhale.
Well, one Jamaican had a big problem with that, how she stereotyped the fact that she's from Jamaica, of course, have smoked pot. And it's her dad. His name's Donald Harris. He's an economics professor at Stanford University. He said, my dear departed grandmothers, as well as my deceased parents, must be turning in their grave right now to see their family's name, reputation, and proud Jamaican identity being connected in any way, jokingly or not, with the fraudulent stereotype of a pot-smoking joy seeker and in the pursuit of identity politics. What's your reaction? Amen. I'd like to write in Donald Harris instead of Kamala. I mean, the pathetic pandering is so cringeworthy from Kamala Harris that even her phone father is throwing her under the bus after she threw her family under the bus. You know, this is a serious issue, and I have written about my own, I guess, somewhat unorthodox views about medical marijuana in particular, and my own family's positive experience with it. It certainly doesn't help the cause of people who are trying to, you know, argue on behalf of things like that, to have somebody so flippant. And you've got time traveler Kamala Harris, of course, who smoked pot while she was listening to music that hadn't even been made yet.
Right, and she's like a ninth grader. She's a ninth grader trying to be one of the cool kids from the people that brought you Get Me a Beer, Elizabeth Warren. If there's one thing to learn from President Trump and even Bernie Sanders, be yourself, and then we'll decide if you're the right person for the job. She's pretending to be somebody she's not. Michelle, thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you, Michelle. You bet. Take care, guys.
By the way, we should point out the campaign has had no comment yet on what her father said. Well, but I bet that's coming today.
They will. They'll have to.
All right, it is 21 minutes before the top of the hour, and Jillian joins us.
Good morning. Let's get you caught up on this story. The attorney representing the Covington Catholic student who is suing the Washington Post says the lawsuit is not just about money. Lynn Wood says Nicholas Sandmann's image is tarnished.
Think about what this young boy is having to deal with at age 16 when the entire world saw him the way the media portrayed him, as literally the face of evil. It is inexcusable, reprehensible conduct by the media. And the Washington Post led the way.
Sandmann's $250 million lawsuit claims the Post published a series of false and defamatory stories because he was wearing a MAGA hat. Sex education may soon become mandatory in some public schools. A Washington state Democrat is pushing a new bill that would require schools to provide the curriculum to students. Supporters claim it is essential to health, relationships, and life goals, but critics say it should not be funded by taxpayer dollars and may be too graphic for children. Sex ed is currently optional in Washington. This police canine is pumped up about fitness. Watch this. The dog doing push-ups with officers at his New Hampshire Police Department. The Auburn Police now challenging other departments to see if they can do any better. You know, you see that angle of the video because for a second I was wondering, I'm like, does someone have a treat up here? And they're like going like, you know, up, down.
Somebody's got a treat. The dog is looking at somebody.
I know.
He just wants to participate.
Maybe the cops have a treat too?
I would want a treat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see the guy behind the counter? He's like typing and he's still going up and down.
It's cute. I love it.
Very good. Thank you
It's like
very much.
Soul Cycle. Have you ever taken one of those classes?
Nope.
All right.
What you do? You move.
No soul.
20 minutes before the top of the hour, and Janice is outside.
What's
Nice
a soul
day.
cycle?
Yeah.
Hi, guys! Look at this crowd today. Amazing. You're from Florida. You know, it's going to be like 86 in Orlando today.
Yes, and
Why
I'm
are
going
you
home.
here?
For work.
Okay. What, you're going to be excited?
Yes.
Just to go home?
Yeah.
Can I come?
Yes, you can.
Excellent. Let's take a look at the maps real quick, and I will show you the discrepancy between what's happening in Tampa and 34 here in New York and across the Northern Plains. It's still 8 in Minneapolis. So it's still cold. That's where we have the potential for snow heading into the next couple of days. The flash flood potential for the southeast over the next few days as well. We're going to see flash flooding. And can you believe we had snow in Las Vegas yesterday, my friends? We have snow in parts of Arizona and Utah and Nevada and Colorado. So that's going to be another big story. Severe weather as well for the southeast. Wave, my enthusiastic bunch of friends. Woo! Thank you for coming to Fox and Friends.
It's going to be 52 degrees today. Do you believe this?
I know. It's going to melt that snow that fell yesterday. All right. Thank you, Janice. Meanwhile, that American ISIS bride went to Syria to help the terror group kill Americans. But now she says, I'm sorry I made some mistakes. I want to come home. But our next guest says if she does come back, she should be tried for treason. All right, a brand new wave of immigrants are arriving at our southern border with Mexico, ready to cross in the United States. They are now camped out near the same border wall that potential 2020 candidate Beto O'Rourke would like to take down.
And Griff Jenkins is live on the ground in Mexico with the caravan as those migrants are preparing to start their day. Good morning, Griff.
Good morning, Ainsley and Steve. That's right, 1,000+ caravan crossing in Mexico's southern border yet again, as in cities like Juarez, you have the shelters just maxing out. The one behind me and one across town, the same scene we've seen, people crammed in there. We talked to one of the migrants, Randy Davidson, about the suggestion by Democrat hopefuls like Beto O'Rourke to take down a wall. Here's what he had to say. When you hear the Democrat candidates say, take the wall down, there should not be a wall, how do you feel about that?
Very comfortable. I guess if you ask many people here what they feel about that, they're going to say, that's like very comfortable.
Take the wall down?
Take the wall down.
A group of House Democrats with the Homeland Security Committee are making a Codell, guys, down to El Paso, across the border from me. A little bit of what they're going to see is a 478% increase of apprehensions in the El Paso sector in fiscal year 19. This all comes as Secretary Nielsen, DHS Secretary Nielsen, made a trip yesterday to El Salvador to try and get those countries to come to an agreement to stop the flow of immigrants. Ainsley, Steve?
All right, Griff, thank you very much.
All right, let's hand it over to Brian for an interview.
All right, hey, the Trump administration is refusing to allow a woman, an Alabama woman, who left the U.S. to join ISIS back into the United States. She had 3 husbands, and now she has 1 kid. Hoda Mutana traveled to Syria and married an ISIS fighter 4 years ago. Now she says she wants to come home. But Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says she's not a U.S. citizen, has no legal basis to return. Her family, of course, pushing back on this. Former Assistant Secretary of State to Colin Powell and attorney Robert Charles joins us now. Robert, for those who leave, whether they're citizens or not, they can't come back, can they?
No, I mean, I think what Mike Pompeo is exactly right here. What you're witnessing is the operational definition of the renunciation or the renouncing of their citizenship. And in our, we have federal statutes. We have the Constitution itself, which defines treason very clearly. In fact, even Alabama has laws that define treason, and she fits directly into that. So the bottom line is that what she did was what they call levying war against the state, or joining a foreign force to fight the United States. And so she's renounced her citizenship claim. The other thing I'll just note is that your last 2 stories, this story and the preceding one, are in some ways related. And they're related because it is very important that we assimilate immigrants into this country. And what happened is she was kind of part of an enclave that was radicalizing people, was sort of untouched by those around her, and eventually ended up over there. Got caught. You can't say, oops, I got caught. And then come back. Right. But the reality is we need to assimilate our immigrants, which is why the president is right in slowing down the flow of immigrants so that they can be taught American history, language, culture, and that civic duties attached to civil rights.
Yeah, I got a huge problem with the lack of history in our schools to begin with, and the way we're redoing the textbooks. But people would push back and say, hey, wait a second. Didn't New York City have Little Italy, and they have, Brazil? Mini Brazil is just across the street here. What's the difference between the way we used to do it and we do it now?
Excellent question. And the bottom line here is that it is important for people to have their cultural identity associated. If you have a long family history in one way or another, I mean, my family got here in the 1640s, but the reality is if you have an Italian, Irish, or Arab history, and the cultural piece of it is fine. You also have to subscribe to the American Bill of Rights. You have to understand the obligations of a citizen. You have to speak the language. You have to understand the history of America. Right. And we've always done that. Believe it or not, whether you were, up until recently, we've been very careful as a community, as a nation, to reach out and to help assimilate people. So that's an important obligation that we all have, to try to bring people into the fold.
And you link stories, I'll link one. It's really about the illegal immigration story. Are people coming here legally the right way? We've never been anti-immigrant. We never will be.
That's right.
But are you coming here the right way, and do you want to be an American? We have to have a process.
Bingo.
All right, that's a good comeback. And they would tell me to rap, as if they were trying to tell you to rap too.
Yes,
all right,
sir.
Robert Charles, thank you so much. Very disciplined man. All right, straight ahead. Many 2020 Democrats have some socialist ideas on their agenda, but which candidate is the most socialist of them all? It's going to be an interesting competition. Our socialism scale is coming your direction. And forget history or economics, one college offering a class on unsettling whiteness, the most bizarre courses of the year, and what it takes to get an A.
Every year, Young America's Foundation compiles a list of the most outrageous courses offered at colleges all across the country, calling out the bias and sometimes very bizarre culture at higher education in America. Joining us now with a few of the more memorable classes from this year's report, Young Americans Foundation spokesman and recent college graduate, Spencer Brown. Hey, Spencer, thanks for being with us.
It's great to be here.
So y'all found 250 bizarre courses at 50 different schools. Which schools did you analyze?
So this report goes through basically the top universities and colleges in America. So the Big Ten, the SEC, the Ivy Leagues, the top 10 U.S. News and World Report ranked colleges, and looks at what these students are actually being taught. And what we find every single year is it just continues this leftward slant and just gets more crazy and more tragic, as the title implies.
Some of these are a little bizarre. At the University of Illinois, you can take a class called Gender in Gaming. It examines the history of gender in video games, internet bullying, doxing, trolling, an effort to consolidate and maintain video games and geek culture as a domain of masculinity and whiteness.
Yeah, so what we see kind of throughout these courses, but this is a key example of it, is just the scapegoating of white males. You know, we see that from the left all over the place, whether it be in pop culture, but especially on college campuses. And so what you see here is them just blaming white men for an apparent lack of representation they feel exists in geek culture for women. And so it really just goes to show, again, white males are the most disfavored group on college campuses.
At the University of Minnesota, you can take a class called Marx for Today. It provides students with an introduction to Marxist theory with particular attention to its relevance for the contemporary world.
You have this course where these are professors teaching the rising generation that somehow Marxist ideology has room in today's society, and obviously that's not the case. If anybody knows anything about Marxism, they realize that the end goal is socialism, and if you want to see how relevant that is today, just look at Venezuela. You know, clearly that's not where we want to be going, but at many universities that seems to be the slant that professors are leading students toward.
Northwestern University, the course is called Unsettling Whiteness. What are your thoughts?
Well, so that's one. A lot of these courses, when we're going through and surveying them, you don't even really know what the point of the course is, because in this case, is it saying that whiteness itself is unsettling, or is it saying that we need to unsettle whiteness as an institution? And again, it's just this anti-white bias that we see on college campuses all over the place.
And at Middleburg College, you can take American Misogyny.
This is, I think, a really good indicator for the double standard that exists in higher education, because if you look at what they go through, they talk about politics, they talk about the age of Trump, somehow implying, you know, that under President Trump, misogyny has had this massive resurgence. But if you look at the left, they're the real misogynists. You know, how many conservative women were said that the only reason they supported the president was because their husbands made them? And I'm willing to bet that's not covered in that class.
Yeah, and these courses are not cheap. They're expensive.
And what do they get? They don't get a degree.
To learn about video games.
Right. They don't actually learn anything like how to manage your finances, how to get and land a job. Recent report shows that almost 40% of American millennials are underemployed. And that's probably because they're getting classes in, you know, unsettling whiteness rather than how to start a business.
All right, Spencer, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Andrew McCabe's been on a media blitz all week, slamming President Trump, and now one senator is demanding answers from him, and you're going to hear from that senator coming up next. Plus, it is a video that will melt your heart, a soldier surprising his wife and his newborn twins in the hospital. The whole family joins us live in the next hour.